Welcome to the Greg's Garage Pod with co-host Jason Pridmore. I'm Greg White, and Jason, you there, buddy?
I'm here, Greg. I'm a little bit bigger, I think, after yesterday. My mom cooked so much food, and I ate way too much. And the shred diet yesterday was non-existent, I think.
I mean, so do you give yourself a pass one day, Jay, or just kind of let it go till at least the first? You know, not
Greg,
New Year's resolutions,
I'm
but
on a
I
full.
mean,
I think I give myself like a 400-day pass. Greg, in case you haven't noticed, I kind of eat what I want these days. Although the last sort of 6 weeks, I've been at it a little bit better, so I have lost some weight and all that. But yeah, Christmas, you got to go for it, don't you? I mean, talking to you yesterday, I know you've been
yeah.
at it a little bit again, and you're talking to me about your mom making fresh hot fudge or fresh
Yeah,
fudge.
no, she did. She did. She does that. And then all over her house where I am, for the last like 10 days, she's had these little like bowls of candy everywhere, man. I mean, they're everywhere and all different types of candy. And I had been eating paleo again for a whole month and
Yeah,
losing weight and feeling great. But she there's a variety of hard candies and Reese's peanut butter cups and blah blah blah, like everywhere. So I caved after like 5 days, and then of course she broke out the fudge and whatever. So look,
and
it's
I can
fun
see,
eating with family though.
and you're still rocking the Santa beard. I mean, I saw the picture, and the Santa beard in front of the Christmas tree there is still in full effect.
Yeah. Listen,
When's
I
that
don't really
coming
talk.
off? When's that
I
coming
don't
off?
know, but I don't talk about this much, honestly, Jay, because I don't really care. But like, I posted that thing up on Facebook, like I don't even know, 12 hours ago or something.
Yeah.
And I mean, I post stuff up on Facebook, and maybe I get 100 likes or 80 like whatever. This thing's like 500 plus people comment, like likes and comments and everything else. And I was like,
Dude,
I
Santa
don't know
is
when it's gonna come
trending.
off.
Santa is trending
Yeah,
right
Santa's
now. So
trending.
you're
Yeah,
probably on all those little hashtag Santa Claus things, and your face is
probably.
coming up.
So next year the goal is hashtag skinny Santa. You know what I mean? Like
Uh-huh.
I'll grow the beard back and wear the hat and maybe be a lot skinnier. I don't know.
So you're hoping that you can actually come down a chimney rather than go through the garage all the time. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying, kind of. What I'm saying is, I'm hoping I can fit into a set of leather so I can get back on a racetrack. You know what I mean?
Ah, yeah, we need to do that.
Ah,
Yeah, we need to
yeah.
do that because
I need.
yeah, we need to see that. It's good.
Uh,
It's good content for our podcast.
it is good content. Now, look, before we get going on this show, because we got
Yeah,
a ton of stuff
let's
to
do it. Yeah,
cover.
yep.
Last week that I told you about listener Peter Johnson's question about
Of
why Moto
course.
America Superbike privateers, ride the Yamahas and stuff like that. I'm going to delay that a little bit, and because I really want to pay some more attention to it and maybe get some sound bites. Because as I started to do the research to get the answer to that question, everyone's really got a different answer. It's not all the same answer. So I'm gonna put it off. Peter, I apologize. I know you were expecting to have it in this week's show. I'm gonna put it off, probably the next couple of weeks because I want to do a better job answering the question, because you may think that it's just kind of like, yeah, like a one-word answer, but it's not.
No,
It's got some very interesting answers.
you're
So
doing the typical GW thing. You're doing all your research, and you've been on the road traveling, and you got a lot of things going on over the holidays. I'm sure Peter will understand that.
yeah.
So yeah, that's all.
But
Good,
we are
GW.
definitely happy that, it's the day after Christmas and we're bringing you this podcast because, we love keeping this momentum going.
For
Don't we?
sure. And it's and like I've said at the end of most of them, all the comments and the things that we get from people have been very positive, and I mean it's kind of fun. It's when you and I started thinking about when we were going to do this, how we were going to carve out an hour, 2 hours. Actually, this whole thing probably takes us 2.5 hours because Greg and I spend 30 or 40 minutes on the phone prior to getting on and doing this, and all through the week coming up with content. So but the reaction from people has been great. So it's good that we're doing this the day after Christmas. All kinds of football, people are together. But if you want to get away for an hour, you got something to listen to.
Exactly. All right, so
Yeah.
we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to kick things off this time with our quick shift segment presented by Arai Helmets. In this segment, we rattle off a couple of questions and give us a time limit, maybe about a minute to talk about each topic. And you'll hear the bell, which sounds like this, during the entire course of the show as we go in between topics. And we kind of set a little bit of a time limit there. So, Jason, even though Arai Helmets meets all safety standards, they don't just build a helmet for safety alone. Comfort is huge. And a better fitting helmet is not only more comfortable, but protects you better. With multiple available interior shapes and an extensive range of interior liners and really. Removable cheek pads. Your Arai helmet can be customized to deliver the perfect fit for you. Visit AraiAmericas.com for more information on tech, fit, and paint jobs. All right, Jason, with that, our quick shift segment presented by Arai. In the past week, Josh Herrin finally announced to Yosh with teammate Tony Elias returning. Matthew Skoltz officially announced at Westby Racing. Cameron Beaubier and Garrett Gerloff confirmed at Factory Yamaha, all in Moto America Superbike. Your thoughts on all this great news?
Well, it's all stuff that we knew, isn't it? I mean, we kind of had a feeling of all that, and I think that the Josh Herrin thing, that it's finally confirmed, I don't even think that's a big shocking announcement. I know they did a really cool video with Josh, and I know he went really well at Chuckwalla when they tested there. So I'm happy for Josh. I think if there's a guy that deserved it, it was him. He definitely had a tremendous year last year. There's a couple guys that were looking at taking that seat. And I think really, if it comes down between Josh Herrin and JD Beach, could have put either one of them on that bike, but they both got great rides now. So congrats to them. And for the rest of the guys, we kind of knew that Skoltz was going to stay where he was, and Cameron and Garrett were going to stay where they are. So none of it's a really big surprise, but it's nice to see that our grid is starting to form up a little bit nicer for Moto America.
100% agreed. And also, the side note is that the test that they've had, he's been on the bike, 4 or 5 days, I guess, already, Josh Herrin. Yeah. And all accounts are that he tests really well and that Yosh is excited to have him on board.
Well, they should be, and he's got a good teammate. It's going to be interesting to see how those two guys get along. Right now, everything's cheery and happy, but as the season kicks off, it'll be interesting. Greg, PJ Jacobsen confirmed a race in Moto America Supersport. He's kind of doing what JD's doing. As this week it came out that he's going to he signed on to ride an ex-Kenny Coolbeth Indian Scout. He's got a bunch of amateur flat track titles, and I know that dirt track's kind of been in his roots. What did you think about this announcement this week?
I think it's great. It's really interesting that more road racers are going flat tracking, and we're not seeing flat trackers come road racing necessarily. But I think that it'll be interesting to see how that affects the different riding. We know that PJ is one of the most talented racers ever. He also has, the 2010 American Flat Track Rookie of the Year to his credit. Yep. So deep roots for PJ Jacobsen in both series. It's going to be interesting to see. It's one thing, Jay, you remember back when you were racing, you'd sign a contract, you had to do double duty, right? You'd race Superbike and 600, or, like Jamie Hacking won 2 championships in 1 year on a stock 1000 and a 600. And even that's difficult. So yeah, it's not in the same weekend, but I think that the amount of laps that these two riders, plus you probably throw in like a Hayden Gillum and some other riders that might be doing some flat track racing, it's going to be a very interesting year, because American Flat Track isn't Moto America, but you have to think the two are going to try to figure out how to cross promote some of these things with each other. Maybe. I don't know.
And you and I are going to talk a little bit more about dirt track going into 2019. And I think the thing that's funny to me is motorcycle road racing in 70s, 80s, especially with Kenny Roberts, and then you had the Eddie Lawsons and Wayne Rainey's and all these guys that came through. They were all dirt trackers that went road racing. It seems really funny now that now so many of the kids, they ride dirt track every week. That's what they do. They're road racers, but they've really cut their teeth in the dirt, and now they're going back to it. And back in the day, they had a Grand National Championship back. I'm talking way back in the day, even before you were around motorcycles, G-Dub. But I remember so many guys that did both, and now we're just getting so many road racers, like you say, they're transferring to dirt track. The dirt trackers aren't coming to us. The road racers are going to dirt track, and I think that they have a good TV package, like we've said. They have good money involved. There's a lot of sponsorship, a lot of good things that have gone on around dirt track over the last 2 years, and that's why we're seeing a lot of our kids that they dirt track every day. Anyways, they're going to do it. I bet you this year we see probably 10 of these guys at the opening round of the Daytona Short Track this year. I wouldn't be surprised. Last year we had at least 5 or 6, and I bet that number goes up. I mean, I'm sure PJ is just another guy that's going to be down there as well. So. Yeah, very interesting.
I love it for both sports. If we can get some flat track fans interested in road racing again, some road race fans interested in flat track, then everybody, the whole sport, both of them grow, and I think that's really key.
Well, yeah, before the the dirt trackers used to have to come to us to make a living. Now it's kind of almost switched a little bit. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, really good job that they're doing down there in Florida. people running flat track. All right, so we're going to move into the meat of the program now. That was our quick shift segment presented by Arai. So now, Jay, let's go ahead and switch topics to MotoGP. And what we're going to do in this particular show, this is our 2018 season in review show. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about MotoGP, these big topics. MotoGP, we'll talk World Superbike, and we'll talk Moto America Superbike in particular. And let's just go ahead and paint a general overview of the season, and then we're going to get into some very specific questions. And we got a lot to talk about, so I'm going to limit these segments to about 3 minutes if you don't really mind on that. At least that's when the bell will go off.
Yeah.
We're pretty fluid. So as I start the clock here, Jay, the first thing I'm going to talk about is MotoGP and general thoughts on the 2018 season. Just for a quick review, of course, Marc Marquez was your world champion. He won by 76 points over Andrea Dovizioso, Valentino Rossi in third. We had 5 different race winners in the MotoGP class. 9 of those going to Marquez. Dovizioso won 4. Vinales won 1. Cal Crutchlow, if you remember, won the second race of the season. And, of course, Lorenzo won 3. So that's kind of just the championship overview, and obviously a dominating performance by Marquez. And, Jay, for me, looking at it, I thought maybe by the second round, you had Crutchlow who won it. Zarco was in second. Rins was third. Marquez had scored 0 points, and Rossi had scored 0 points. I thought, wow, we are in for a completely different MotoGP season, but it didn't quite work out that way.
No, I think when you look at that race in Argentina and how crazy it was, I mean, if you remember Miller getting on pole, and then they kind of started the warm-up lap, and then after the sighting lap, and everybody actually after the warm-up lap, everybody just said, we're not going to go out on slicks, and Miller was at the front of the grid by himself. And then of course Marquez was pinballing off of guys throughout the course of that race, having to come in and change tires and things, if you remember. Yeah. And I think he actually ended up finishing 4th or 5th actually on track. And then of course he got the big time penalties, pushed him out of the points. There was really nothing else that they could do at that point. We thought he should have been disqualified at the beginning, just pushing his bike backwards or riding his bike backwards on the grid. Yeah, and then Coda comes around, and the kid's never lost there, and he again dominated there, and that kind of set the tone for the rest of the year. He crashes more than anybody. If you saw this week, the crash stats came out, and Marquez crashed more than anybody this year, but Greg, he doesn't do it in the race, and that's the important part. It doesn't really matter what the stats are. I think that the crash stats are great, but if you're not doing it during the race, it almost doesn't matter.
Yeah, I completely agree. The other stats that he had, he never finished off the podium when he finished a race.
Yeah,
which is really impressive for this day and age. He did have 2 DNFs and 2. Well, I guess he had 2 0-point paying positions, the second race and in Italy as well. So that's kind of, but when the guy's in the race, he's always on the podium and always finds a way. And there were a few races this year where I thought, oh, Marquez is out of it. He's 5th place. He's never going to claw his way back. Or he was, 2.5 seconds off in second place and clawed his way back up to the front and won the race. And he's just amazing. I mean, he's amazing what he does on a motorcycle. The thing that I worry about with him for the future is the amount of crashes that he has. He's been extremely lucky. And, with electronics and with the technology now built into these suits and protecting people, I just hope it continues to last for him and we don't have an incident where he's going to snap something and that's going to force him into retirement. You know what I mean?
Well, and you bring up such a good point there, because when you look at somebody like even Cal, he crashes a lot as well, obviously. And a lot of the crashes that these guys have now, Greg, are low sides. I mean, we don't see a lot of big high sides anymore. And Cal, unfortunately, crashed turn 1 at Phillip Island, broke his ankle really bad. It sounds like it's pretty bad anyways. I mean, I think he's going to be fighting fit and fitness and getting healthy, hopefully before the start of the year. But it sounds like his ankle, reading up on it a little bit, was pretty badly damaged. And it's just a matter of twisting. If you twist your ankle the wrong way, or your arm gets twisted, or wrist or anything like that gets compromised, if you start breaking things in joints, it definitely can hurt you. So you're 100% right. I think as he gets older, being able to just get back up from all these crashes are something he's got to hopefully he can cut those things down in practice even. But that's kind of what makes him. And won enough world championships. Who are we to argue with that? So moving forward, Greg, let's talk about, we thought about a couple different things, or a couple different categories, not really so much awards, if you will, but looking at some things. I'm curious to know the most underrated rider this year, 2018. And I think you and I both agree on this. I chose Alex Rins. we talked about, Alex Rins to me kind of flies under the radar a little bit. I think when Iannone was signed at Suzuki, he was the guy that was going to come in and start winning races for them, and he was the guy that was going to start doing things. Alex Rins was very impressive this year on the Suzuki. I believe he had 4 podiums, 8 total for Suzuki this year. He had 4 of them. But it's not so much how he's getting his podiums, it's the pace that he is showing. I mean, even up into the last race of the year, he led that race in the rain by some 5 or 6 seconds. Ended up being on the podium at the end of the day, not winning, but I don't think it's too far away for him until we see him standing in the middle.
No, I completely agree. I mean, yeah, he finished, 5th in the points. He's 152 points back. But if you really look at, especially the end of the year, if you go those flyaway races, you go Thailand, Japan, you go to Australia and Malaysia. I mean, he was on the podium in Japan, on the podium in Malaysia, and then on the podium at the final race as well. And it was 9 total for Suzuki, and he had 5.
Amazing. Oh, he did have 5. Okay, I thought it was 4
Yeah,
and 4,
because
but
remember he
5
had
did
that
he?
one
Yep.
he had that last one. So,
Yep.
Looking at Rins, he did podium the second race of the year. He had a DNF, then he finished second, but then he had 2 DNFs in a row. I think maybe that start of the season, when you go into round 5 and you only have 16 points in your pocket, I think there was an easy way for him to fly under the radar. But I think he definitely matured towards the end of the season. And after you had that rain out in Great Britain, and then we started that run at the end of those last 7 races. He had 6 only. He scored 13 points, and then 10, and then all of a sudden it was like, bam, there's Rins all the time.
Yep.
So my concern moving forward with Rins, and I know we're not looking forward too much though, is how will the Suzuki be developed? But I agree with you 100%. I think that the most underrated rider for sure all year long is Alex Rins, and I think he had some bad luck and just maybe made some bad decisions, on the racetrack. But he's impressive. He's an
Yeah.
impressive person to watch race a motorcycle, and he's got a bright future in this sport.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that if they can continue the development of that bike, I think Gintelli's doing a good job for them as the test rider from all things that I've read, and I think that Rins this next year, and Mir went extremely fast on that bike, so the bike seems like it's fairly user friendly. Joan Mir, the new signing with Suzuki this year that took Iannone's spot, it could be a fun year for Suzuki. I think they got 2 young, aggressive, hungry riders, so I think it could be a good year for them.
The other thing that impressed me was he just kept getting stronger and stronger like later in the race. And
Yeah.
I think it's difficult to see like riders go out there like jackrabbits and then fade, as
Yep.
opposed to riders that maybe don't start as strong, but they're really showing their stuff at the end. I think that's really impressive. So yeah,
Agree.
our underrated
Late
rider,
race
both
pace,
of
he's
us,
all right there. Yeah.
is all right there. All right. So next question, Jason, is who is a rider who didn't meet your expectations for 2018 in MotoGP?
Mine would have
Who
to
do you
be
think?
Vinales. I think when I had a chance to look at this, the list of questions that we created, I think it's and people will think, well, yeah, but all the Yamahas had issues. That is true. Up until Australia, though, Vinales was pretty much a ghost this year. He always tests great, but you had Rossi, you had Zarco beating him, and I felt like Vinales at the beginning of the races with full fuel loads struggled so hard, and then he'd always come through late in the race, and they'd always be talking about him and mentioning his name. Sort of would tend to go that he was moving forward, but by then the race was over, and I think that the form that he showed in the last couple of rounds, we didn't really get to see. A lot of form in the last race because of the conditions that it was in, but he was fast that weekend, obviously at Valencia, and but I think throughout the course of the year, I think Vinales is top 3 riders in the world. And when you think about the guys that are there, and me saying that, when you just consider Dovi and Marquez, who would be the next guy, I think Vinales is incredible. Um, but I think that he was my surprise this year. What about you?
Well, I definitely like support your big, your surprise because, Vinales was pretty strong. I mean, as a rider, if you finish 4th in the points and we're saying, that he didn't meet our expectations,
Yep,
that's how much we think of him. For me,
100% right.
I
Yep.
go with Jorge, and the reason I go with Jorge, I think, is because looking at the podiums that he had last year on the Ducati, and I thought the way that Dovizioso rode that bike and the development of the bike, I had an expectation just in my head that Lorenzo
Hmm.
was going to come out and pop himself back into the top three in points,
Yep.
which until he got on the Ducati, I don't think he'd been out of since he won the world championship. Actually, he finished second in '09, and then won the world championship in 10. I don't, he's an alien, right? That was a thing from a few years ago. We talked about aliens, and I think that looking at his results, you can't say in the championship, yes, he finished ninth, but he was also out, for the whole last stint up until the last race. He had a couple, misfires there at the beginning. Um, he won three races, but I think finishing ninth in the championship and signing that contract early, with Honda, to
Hmm.
me was a bit of a shock. It kind of showed me what his mindset was at Ducati, and it was so weird. It seemed like he signed the contract, and 5 minutes later he won a race, then won another
Hmm.
race, then a couple of races later won the third. So for me, I think it was Jorge. I think expectations now are going to be set a lot higher that he's going to be on the Honda, but he was definitely my choice. What do you think about my choice?
I think your choice is interesting because it kind of goes right into our next question of who was the biggest surprise of 2018. And believe it or not,
Hmm.
I got Lorenzo in that. And I think that a lot of your argument there with him holds a lot of water, except for the fact that he was off the radar all last year too. I mean, if you would ask me this question at the beginning of the year, I I had Lorenzo doing really well last year. This year, I even took him in the MotoGP pool again because listen, you don't win as many world championships as this guy has, and just get thrown into kind of thrown to the side. When you think about what actually happened in Mugello, if it went down the way it did, where basically Honda came up to him and gave him a certain amount of time of like, hey, listen, we'll sign you on our team. You've got to make a choice. At that point, Ducati was ready to cut his salary by 70%. It sounded like. Um, it's so crazy to think that he went out and won. So when you put the biggest surprise of 2018, it kind of goes along with your expectations from the question prior. But for me, when I put that he's the biggest surprise, I'm saying that in a good way, not as in a negative. I always felt like Lorenzo could win. I'm not like a giant fan of the guy, I guess you could say. But as a rider, I really am. I love how he rides. And the fact that he won didn't surprise me. I think the fact that he won surprised so many other people, and that's why it's a surprise. I think for when we look at this, he was my biggest surprise. I think the fact that he won three in a row and got signed by Honda, that's pretty surprising. So all of
Yeah.
that question kind of stems around a few different ways of looking at what Jorge Lorenzo did. What about you or your biggest surprise?
Okay, I kind of dug deep on this one because it was like an initial surprise, like a feeling, and then I kind
Uh
of
huh.
dove deep, and I've I've come up with some stats to support my choice.
Oh,
Okay,
this ought to be good. Greg with his
yeah.
stats.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so Hafid Cyrene was my big surprise for 2018 for a couple of reasons. Jason, you and I, when I when I raced motorcycles and you raced motorcycles at the same time, we used to have a conversation about being consistent and also about the difference between a good qualifier and a racer and
Mm-hmm.
how, you know, you should race better than you qualify oftentimes. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's difficult with, say, Q tires if you don't have a feel, but in normal circumstances. So I went and looked at Hafid's stats for the year. He finished 15 of 18 races. Okay. And when he finished those races, there was only one race at Assen where he actually finished below where he qualified. He qualified 15th and finished 18th. Every other race of the 14 of the 15 that he finished, he always either finished better than he qualified or equal. One at Aragon, he 18-18, but always beat it, right? So here's the thing about him that I was impressed with. Total from his qualifying position until he finished, Jason, he gained 76 positions all year. You know what I
Yeah.
mean when you add it up.
Yep.
Um, so if you look at it that way, from where he qualified to where he finished, he averaged 5 positions better. That's almost 2 rows, per race.
Yep.
What really impressed me was as we got to those flyaway races at the end of the year. So when we went to Thailand, he qualified 18th, finished 12th. In Japan, qualified 16th, finished 10th. Okay, so that's 6 places. He didn't finish in Australia, but Malaysia qualified 23rd, finished 10th. That's 13th. And in Valencia, he qualified 21st and finished in 10th spot. So of the 76 positions he gained total for the year, 36 of those, 9 per race, were made up in those last 5 races. that is 47%, so he really started to show me something towards the end of the year in terms of strength on the bike. And the
Yep.
other thing to take into consideration is that you're talking about a motorcycle that hasn't really had any updates as the factory support bike. They're as closest to the actual factory bike in the beginning of the year and as far away from the factory bike at the end of the year. So that's why he's my choice, Jason,
You dug a little deep
for
there. I love all your
biggest
stats.
surprise.
Look at you. You know, and I think that
It was a long
when you
explanation, I know, but
that was pretty long. I mean, you like were really you're on
oh,
top
and
of
I
the
have
mountain
more.
for
Trust
him.
me, I have more.
No,
I
I'm
just
sure.
I had to shut my mouth.
What I would have loved to seen from of his from him this year is I would have loved to have seen him just run with Zarco at a couple races, like be right behind him. You know, I think
Yeah.
that would have been a nice thing to see if he could have just even one or two rounds. I mean, I know he kind of got pushed into that seat at the beginning of the year when Folger went out, and he got kind of shoved in there, and I think he did okay. I wish that there could have been a little bit more for him on the side of results. You know, like
Yeah,
just being up
especially on
there
the
a couple
Yamaha,
times.
especially on the Yamaha,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's going
yeah,
to right now the way testing looks on the KTM, it looks like it might be his best year that he's going to have. So
yeah. Well,
we'll
the
see. All right, let's move
KTM's
on to the
yeah,
next. Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of that, let's move on to the biggest surprises
yeah.
of 2018. For me, I think it was KTM. On the podium on the last race, I thought it was pretty incredible. And with Aprilia being as big of a factory as they are, and amount of resources that they have, I know there's turmoil in the team. I really thought that Aprilia would put it on the podium before KTM did, but they did it, and I thought it was a tremendous surprise. And it warms my heart thinking about it, because
Yeah.
I've known some people KTM here in the U.S. I know how small that factory is in Austria, and it was just really impressive. What about you?
I think Greg that you bring that up, and every manufacturer, every team needs that podium, especially if you've never done it before. And that is a great way. What Paul Espargaro did at Valencia was a great way to push KTM into 2019 with some positive motivation. Next year they've gone from 2 bikes to 4 bikes on the grid. They've got Miguel Oliveira, who finished second in the Moto2 World Championships, and obviously they got Cyrene, they got Zarco, which is great, and Paul is back again. So it was a great shot in the arm for that team because, like you said, Greg, everybody there is working so hard with that team for them to finally put it on the podium. And yeah, it was a conditions race, but it doesn't matter. They got to experience being on the podium, and I think that's a good
And
one.
everybody
Now,
had to race it, right? You know what I
everybody
mean?
had to race
Everybody
it.
had to race it. So yeah, and
This,
and if you watch the way Paul rode that bike, dude, he was not. I mean, he was.
oh,
The thing was
he was
moving
riding.
around, and I
He
mean,
was
it was like he
overriding
was.
it completely. Yes.
Yeah, he was riding the nuts off that thing for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Now, when we did these, we were trying to think of one kind of answer, one to the question, and I actually got 2. So you're gonna have to bear
Oh,
with
what's
me
the
on
biggest
this one.
surprise 2018? You have 2.
Yeah, I got 2.
All right,
All
you
right,
glutton. Go ahead.
I got 2, and I'm gonna brush through the first one. But Yamaha struggling as much as they did this year. When you see
Mm,
a top manufacturer struggle
hmm
as much as Yamaha did, and they missed a little gray area that both Honda and Ducati kind of jumped on. And I think that it's been well noted that some of the things that Yamaha had struggles with getting off corners with some of the electronics this year, the fact that Yamaha struggled as hard as they did with that has been pretty well noted. Now, the other thing you just kind of brushed up on it a little bit with your surprise, but do you ever sit back and wonder, Greg, just and I don't even know how to say this respectful, but just how bad Aprilia have been? Aprilia the last however many years, they've been in MotoGP for a while now, and there's so much turmoil within that team. It seems to me that there's so much animosities, anger. We've seen so many things come through it from when Sam Lowe's was there, even in the last 2 years, to Redding, even this year. Riders become very outspoken because things within the structure of the team. And then when you look at Aprilia, this year they've come out with a new superbike, and Eugene Laverty's been riding that thing. Aprilia just seems like a very confused company as far as direction goes to me right now, and it's great having them involved. But when you sit back and you think about the money that Aprilia has spent, do you think that the money has been worth the money they put forward when you look at the results of their efforts?
I think really you look at one guy moving, Gigi Dall'Igna, when he went
Yeah.
over to Ducati, it kind of threw Aprilia, a little bit of a curveball. I agree with you on that. I definitely think Aprilia is shocking to me. I mean, they
Yeah.
make a great motorcycle. They just can't get it together in MotoGP yet. I like that Bradley Smith has gone over there. I like the feedback he's given, but you have to look at that last test. The fact that both their paid riders, couldn't ride at full strength, or I don't know. I mean, they're going to have a whiz bang test. When they get to Sepang and choose a motor direction and hope that it's going to be the motor that they can work with to keep improving that motorcycle throughout the year.
But wouldn't you have basically, put your house on the fact that Aprilia would get a podium before KTM? And I know, again, it was
Totally.
a conditions thing at Valencia, but it's got to be pretty painful to sit there and think about the fact that I know Aleix is a great rider. We saw what he did on the Tech 3 Yamaha when he signed with them, 5 years ago, I guess it was. He goes to Doha, puts it on
Yep.
pole, and in our little MotoGP poll, everybody picked him after that week. Just after that, you know,
Yeah.
and so we know he can ride, but even he's become more and more outspoken with the things that they need to get fixed on the bike. And I really hope that, and I don't know how it's going to turn out, but with Iannone going there, I think Iannone is a tremendous rider. I think he deserves to be on a better motorbike, but I think it could really blow up in their face this year if they don't get that thing working the way it needs to work, and get their riders up front a little bit more. I think it's going to be a rough year again for Aprilia.
No doubt about it.
So looking back, Greg, at the Moto2 season, uh, recapping it and seeing the Pecco Bagnaia did what he did this year. There was actually a pretty good battle between him and Miguel Oliveira. Oliveira rode tremendous. When I look back at the recap of Moto 2, the couple things that stand out for me, obviously Bagnaia's consistency, how good he was, how effortless he made things look. But I think looking at how bad Joan Mir did, even Alex Marquez is a bit of a disappointment. What stood
Yeah.
out to you? What stood out to you?
Yeah, looking at the championship, and you had Pecco Bagnaia, who of course won the championship by a slim 9 points over Oliveira. Those two riders scored points in every race this year, which
Yeah.
we don't often see in Moto 2. Moto 2 has been a class that's so aggressive, you got to throw it down. The fact that Pecco won 8 races, to Oliveira's 3. Brad Binder won 3. A lot of people aren't talking about Binder and what a great job he did.
Yep.
Baldessari. So you had 7 different race winners this year. I think I'm kind of on board with you with this championship. It just seemed like for Bagnaia, right? Like that, it was kind of like win or he wasn't around. I mean, he won 8 races, and then he only had 3 more podiums. The rest were like 2 points here, 4 points there, 8 points, 7, and so on. So for me, it kind of had that feeling. If you look at the stats, it doesn't really support that. So I thought that in terms of the actual championship battle, reviewing the Moto 2 season, I think it was obviously the best championship MotoGP had in terms of, points being close and when the championship was decided and all those types of things. But it just seemed to me, that Pecco was on top. And I don't think that he ever relinquished the lead in the championship, did he? All season.
I can't
I mean, he
remember.
won
I
the
think
first race.
I thought Oliveira tied him up at one point, or they got close. But what you're bringing up
He
right now that I love is you win your championships on your worst days, and the fact that the kid got points on some of those days. Yeah, they weren't big handfuls of points, but I think it was even at Motegi. He was struggling. He was like eighth, ninth, wherever. He was back there a fair bit, and but he just kept plugging along. And I think that when you are in the course of a race, especially a 20-something lap race, in a class that's as volatile as that is, I think if you can stay patient and realize, okay, I'm seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, wherever, I'm not having my best day, something's off a little bit. If you wait around long enough, it's almost inevitable towards the last 5, 6, 8 laps of the race that someone's going to make a mistake and give you a couple extra points. I think there's a lot to be said about the kid in the sense that, you bring up he scored in every race. Some of them weren't the best, but when he could win, he was there winning. But on the
No,
ones
and
that
he
he
did score
thought that
points, and yeah.
yeah, he was still scoring points even when he wasn't winning.
I mean, because if you actually add up in Germany, in Australia, so Germany, Australia, he scored 4 points in each one of those races. Valencia, he scores 2 points. That's the total of 10 points right there, and in
Yep.
3 races, and he won by 9.
Yep.
So you're right. I mean, when you add up his worst points paying places for those three races, those won him the world title. Now, the other thing too, though, was just going back in terms of consistency. You had Binder, who was in third spot in the championship, but 108 or 105 points back. That's four races plus some points, you know?
Yep.
And so
Yep.
looking at that season, I think you have to say, that Oliveira and Bagnaia were far and away, the class of the field, even though you had a total of 7 different race winners and Binder won 3. So there were
Yep.
some good things, Quartararo finishing 10th and winning a race.
Yeah, but he really came on strong. I mean, we talked about a couple guys limping into MotoGP, and Quartararo was on that. He was on that bandwagon for me.
But he came on right at the right time, didn't he? Because it was like at Catalunya, he wins, and the next race he finishes second place, and then all of a sudden, and that was like, hey, this kid's coming up. But
correct.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he manages an entire race, season in MotoGP next year. No question about that.
And I think, but he deserves that ride because you look at Danny Kent had that, he was his teammate, and with that speed up chassis, I think that a lot of people didn't think that it was going to be, even capable of being where it was. And I think he's going to do a good job, and it seems like he's already done a pretty good job in his first 2 tests on that MotoGP bike. So good for him.
Moving to Moto3 and looking at this season in review, there's always the perception, Jason, of how you think the season went for a rider, and watching an entire year span or whatever it is, 9-10 months of racing, and then going back and looking at the actual stat sheet.
Yep.
Jorge Martin won the world championship. He was 42 points ahead of Fabio Di Gianantonio.
Teammates.
Yep. Teammates, right. So you had 7 different race winners, including Ken Anjou. Remember, he was the one-off Red Bull rookie, right? Last race, like unbelievable. So 7 different race winners. Martin won 7. But Jay, here's the thing that's like gnarly about this. Jorge Martin won 7 races, but he also had 5 DNFs.
Yep.
5 DNFs. I mean, on a race winning standpoint, that's giving away 125 points. And very strangely, only 260 points won the world title in Moto3. If you looked at just the world championship classifications at the end of the year, you'd think, Moto3 is like, But reality to me is Moto3 is the best racing class in the world.
Yeah. I'm going to tell our listeners right now that for your 2019 resolution, if you have never, try to sit down and watch all the Moto3 races because they're so close. And the reason for so many DNFs, Greg, is because they are so on the absolute edge for so long. The problem is the bikes are all so close. So the racing, it takes nothing to hook a handlebar and have a tip over here or there. And they're pushing so hard throughout. Every class is, but it's a lot like our Liqui Moly class in Moto America. It's when that racing gets so close, I get nervous for those kids because it's just so close. The top speeds aren't there like you see in MotoGP compared to a Moto3 bike, but the racing is so close, and I think that's why that you get such a high DNF rate and you can still win the championship because when you're capable of being able to go out and get those 25 points, would you say, Greg, 7 times Martin did that this year?
Yeah,
I believe so. When you look at that's just such a gigantic chunk of points that he's getting. And really, that was the difference between him and Bezzecchi, because Bezzecchi, especially towards the end of the year, was throwing it down the road a lot. Bezzecchi, without question, had the fastest bike on the grid. The KTM with Bezzecchi on it specifically, especially when they went to some of the fast tracks. One race that really sticks out in my mind more than any of them is Austria. Martin was so far back. And if you go back and you watch that race, he just kind of plotted his way through, picked his way through, knowing that it was a long race. But
he ended up finishing third. I mean, that was a good solid 16 points. Yeah,
and he got that thing on the last lap. And when you look at it, Greg, that race to me stood out. That wow, this guy is that good because he had to strategize how he was going to get his Honda up to the front of that race because at one time he was back in 14th with Bezzecchi leading. And I think that when I looked at that race, I thought, wow, that was impressive. And then Di Gianantonio, I think he ended up getting second in the championship, and he did that at the last race of the year. Bezzecchi again crashed at the final round. Actually crashed twice.
4 points. Yeah, 4 points difference there. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So it allowed the two teammates to run 1-2. Another guy though that had some inconsistencies, and on his bad days as far as where he finished in points, his bad days weren't as good as Martin's. When Martin did finish races, he was always a lot higher up than where DeGiantonio was when he was not finishing races,
Yeah,
or when
that's
he
very
was
true.
finishing races as well.
The one stat I'd love to be able to see sometime for Moto3 is how many crashes on the final lap and across the entire. That's one thing that we always seem to, not always, but the majority of the time we see someone throw it down the road on the last lap because that racing is so furious.
So
And
close.
although
And
I hate
yeah,
to
you're
see
exactly right.
crashes, I'd love to see crashes as long as the person stands up and they're okay. So,
Yep.
because I love to see the effort going into it. I love to see the desire to win, and it's the old Kevin Schwantz, kind of win it or bin it thing. That old quote that Kevin had: "I invite the motorcycle to go around the track with me. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't."
Yep.
That's the way it is in Moto3. It's like the riders are just so focused on trying to get those things around the corner, and sometimes it just doesn't make it. So,
Well, you watch a MotoGP guy crash, they kind of just maybe look up, throw their arms up, and walk away. Moto3 riders, when they crash, they're young, so they're so much more animated and losing their minds, especially if they got taken out. So I love watching that series.
yep. So there you go, Moto3 season
When
in review.
when we start looking forward now, we've kind of you know gone through the MotoGP paddock. What a World Superbike this year. When we look at the season review, all right, one of the biggest things that I get really frustrated with is I get frustrated when I hear people talk about Jonathan Rea and that he should just move on and that it's spoiling the series and it's this and that. I need people to look at it differently. It's so fun watching that guy ride, and the fact that he's as good as he is, and the fact is that he's got teammates that have been on the same bike as him and this and that aren't quite capable of doing the same thing. People need to look at it differently. It's a business. He's getting paid a lot of money to ride for Kawasaki, and we've gone through this before on our podcast, Greg, where the fact that he's not moved to MotoGP is only because he doesn't feel like there's a seat that he can go win on right now. And at his age, with the amount of money he's making, with the race bonuses he gets, I think it's a very wise decision financially and for his financial future for his family that he stays where he's at. But Jonathan Rea, when you look at the season in review, really, what more can you talk about than the dominance that he's had, winning his fourth Superbike championship in a row?
17 race wins on the season. 17.
Amazing. Yep.
Now, I don't know anything about Jonathan Rea's contract. I don't know how much money he makes, like with a race win. But what's the biggest race bonus you've heard of in your years racing? Mine is 70,
Aladdin.
right? Which was
I think
well over 50,000 a race, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep,
because
and 100,000 a race, but yes,
100,000 a race. Okay, so
Matt did a win only thing.
Win only thing, which was So if most manufacturers say, okay, we'll pay you 25, we'll pay you 15, Matt said, no, you pay me to win, or I don't get any bonuses. And and so I know that Matt, I'm sure is listening. Hi, Matt. And we'll get a text, but yeah. So I mean, let's just say, Jonathan Rea is getting something along those neighborhoods. If he was getting Matt Mladen bonuses, that'd be 1.7 million alone. Could you explain to me, if you made 1.7 million on bonuses alone, just from your manufacturer, not from your helmet company, leather company, boots, whatever it is, why would you leave?
Yeah. Well, that's
just your ego would say, well, I raced a GP bike. He's been in GP. He's raced a race or two on a Honda or whatever.
On a Honda 5 years ago.
Did solid.
Yeah, 5.
You know what I mean? Like, he's been out there. Everyone knows the talent that Johnny Rea has. The guy could be, without question, a top MotoGP racer in my,
No question.
But circumstance, whatever. It is just kind of the way it is. And I would rather be a full-blown factory Kawasaki racer in World Superbike, winning that many races and dominating and doing those things, and have people bellyache about it, than be on
at 30-something years old.
At 30-something years old, than being on a satellite team, floundering around in 6th, 10th place. That deal. Just me. What can I say?
Yeah. But Greg, it's you got to look. You've been around it long enough. You're looking at it as a business, and I think that when a lot of our listeners and people within the motorcycle world, it's a hobby for all of us,
Sure.
And I think that they look at it and they go, well, why doesn't he want to push himself? I'm sure he does. And when he did those results on the Honda back in the day, I think he took Pedrosa's spot when Pedrosa was hurt a couple times, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe,
But he's getting thrown in on race weekends. They're not like he's getting to go out and test for 5 days or 10 days or a lead up. These are like just, hey, can you come and do this round? Such and such is hurt, and you're our world superbike rider currently, and could you do it? That's pretty hard to do, to just go throw yourself into a series the way he had. So when we start talking about his dominance, is it spoiling World Superbike? I don't think it is. I think
Yeah.
there's a number of reasons why I think World Superbike, to me, is struggling a little. I don't like the restrictions. I don't like restricting motorcycles to try to make the competition closer, because no
Yeah.
matter what, the teams and the manufacturers are too smart. They'll figure out ways. If you're on the best bike, you're on the best bike. And right now he is. And that is absolutely taking zero away from the guy. The guy could win on anything, I feel.
And that's why our season review revolves around, really, Johnny. There were 6 different race
Agreed.
winners. Chaz won 2, Vandemark 2, Sykes 1, Melandri 2, and Lowe's 1. We'll probably talk about them more as we get into these questions. But I mean, I think the season revolves around Johnny Ray. And listen, Jason, just to button that up, because I know that this topic's out of time, but there was also a challenge, with the rev limits and things like that. There was the challenge,
Correct.
and they have another challenge coming up, with the new ZX10 RR on hand. So it's not like he's riding the same bike with the same rules year after year, just pounding out. We got to Phillip Island, and Johnny Ray didn't win the first 2 races. Ducati did.
Nope.
And I think initially everybody was like, uh-oh. And then he just kind of swept the rest of the season, you know what I mean, kind of thing.
It's
but
amazing.
it's absolutely positively amazing. And I love watching it. I love watching the guy ride, like you say, and I love watching the domination and the way he handles the racetrack. And you know what? Like any other sport, he's the guy. I mean, he's the guy that you've got to go chase. And I think that's always good, because if you can get some young blood in there and start chasing them around, they're only going to get better and better and better. The question is, if you have someone that can contest Johnny Ray right now, who's young, they won't be in World Superbike very long, would they? They'd bounce somewhere else. Go
Well,
to
you would
GP.
think, but I think World Superbike needs to keep their riders. And how great is it that it got announced also that they're coming back here next year? I think that they're coming back to Laguna will be great. And
Yes.
and now they got 3 tries at them a weekend, Greg. World Superbike's going to have 3 races in a weekend.
Yeah.
I think it's just World Superbike's trying to evolve. They're trying to put together a program that people like and people want to be at. And World Superbike, when you and I were racing back in the day, was the championship to watch. I mean, it just had so much incredible talent. So
Corser, Colin, whatever. Hey, Jay, who do you think is the most underrated rider of 2018 then in World Superbike? Because Johnny Ray is obviously top.
My answer is going to shock you, but it's a guy that I've been watching for the last few years, and he's a guy that I feel like I've asked around about him, even because am I missing something? Am I not seeing something? It's a guy that I don't think has a lot of money behind him, so he doesn't maybe get the best rides. He was on the best ride, I think, the first year he came into World Superbike. But the guy I really like to watch, that I think is underrated, and if you put him on a good bike, have I led this up enough, Greg?
Yeah, no kidding. Like I'm literally like going through the start grid. I'm like, let's see here.
I like Jordi Torres. Jordi Torres rides incredibly hard. I've gone and I've sat on the edges of the racetracks and I've watched what he does. Attitude always seems amazing. I don't know him. I don't. When you and I did this thing, I thought there's probably a few different riders I could choose on this. And now he's just been signed, I think, next year on the Guadagnini Kawasaki, I believe, or Pedercini. Might be on the Pedercini Kawasaki. Guadalajara, I believe, is on the Yamaha. But Torres, for me, is the guy who I feel, if he had really had a really good shot on a top bike now, we saw him go to MotoGP this year. He took over Rabat's place when Rabat got hurt. And but Torres, to me, I think is a little bit of an underrated commodity.
Interesting. Well, for me, I think it's Eugene Laverty, only because I think he's a much better rider than the equipment that he was on. We talked about, kind of Aprilia in the MotoGP. I just think, Laverty, when he had the bike that could make the tire last, I mean, he had 1 podium this year. I get it, but I just think he's underrated because he's not on the equipment that could really showcase his talent. And I think that, as he moves forward, we're going to see if I'm right or not. But I just like the way Eugene rides. I always have. There is a shelf life for all racers. We get it. And as much as, when Jason, you and I talked about this for years, and you look at Nicky Hayden, for instance, going to World Superbike, there's certain riders that we know have not lost it just yet. And we always thought
Hmm.
Nick was one of those, and he won a race in the rain and all that. And I think Eugene Laverty falls into that category for me. I don't think that he has hit the peak of his riding ability just yet. I think that he needs an infusion of energy that he got when he got on the podium, kind of midway through the season. Um, if I'm looking at the stats, it was race 2 at Laguna, and I remember being there thinking, wow, is this the turning point for him? He's back on it. He knows that he can finish on the podium, and it just didn't quite pan out the rest of the year. And I don't think it was his fault entirely. I just think he's an underrated rider, and time will prove me right on that one, Jason.
Yeah, Eugene's a funny guy to me. I don't know him personally. Hear nothing but great things about him, but he's been around a long time. He's won countless World Superbike races. I don't know what his total is as far as how many he's actually won.
World Super
He's
Sport
been
2,
on
right? Yeah.
World Super Sport 2. He's been on a number of different brands. I think that when you look at somebody like him again, it's really comes down to how good his equipment is underneath him. Underrated. I don't know if I would say that he's underrated in my eyes. I think that I still look at him like he's a top 5 World Superbike guy. But it always just seems like something. Like this year at Portimao, he goes and gets pole. I mean, pole position, ripping such a fast lap, and gets taken out in the third or fourth corner by Xavi Forés right off the bat, right off the start. A race where I really felt like he had a chance to win. Uh, so, or at least to be in the running. But I agree, and now he's got this V4 Ducati, and there's always just things around Eugene that never seem to be ideal. He's not got the chance to test the bike. He's going to go test the bike. I think he gets on the bike first time, and I know I'm probably wrong on this, but I believe it's the Phillip Island test. He gets to ride the bike a week prior to him actually racing it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be a feel out process for him on that thing. But that's kind of the way it is for Eugene. So is he underrated? He might be because of the situations that he's in, but I rate him. I rate him pretty high as a rider myself. So yeah, interesting. When you look at expectations,
Mm-hmm.
when you start these seasons off, all the riders have all these expectations of themselves and where they're going to be. And you and I kind of look at things. When you look at expectations going into 2018, who maybe didn't meet your expectations this year? Was there somebody that sticks out for you that didn't quite meet it?
Well, yeah, and keep in mind this is just an expectation I made up in my head, and
Yeah,
not really knowing
scary,
the team.
scary.
Yeah, not really knowing the team or whatever. I would have to say PJ, and not really any fault of PJ because he is unbelievably talented, and I think the testing leading into Suzuka 8-hour. I think the results that he was able to get on that Honda and Suzuka 8-hour kind of show us really what he's capable of. But I had an expectation of him going to World Superbike for the first time, and with the way that the Pirellis move around under World Superbike machines, his dirt track background, I kind of built this up in my head, and I was realistic about it. I knew he was going to be on a Honda, the CBR 1000RR Fireblade or whatever they call it over there. Isn't the greatest and most competitive motorcycle, but I thought that when it was all said and done, unfortunately for him, like I said, not really any fault of PJ's, because the word that I got when I was at Laguna, some riders told me that when he rode that motorcycle, they thought that he was going to pitch the thing off the road all the time, and that his talent was so immense that it was the only thing keeping the bike on the track, because it was just just a poorly managed motorcycle, altogether. So for me, I think it's PJ in a weird way of answering that question. So
Yep.
yeah, what
Well,
about
I
you?
think, Greg, when you start looking past the main teams in World Superbike, so you got Ducati and Cowie and Yamaha, and you've got some really good factory supported teams as well, like Pacetti comes
Mm-hmm.
to mind. Um, when you get beyond there, those teams are struggling to be in the paddock, and I think that there's a weird combination there. A lot of the teams that are in the bottom tier of World Superbike usually come with team owners that have fairly big egos. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
I've dealt with it. I know a number of riders that have gone over, not only from here, but riders. Some of my friends that have gone from Australia to World Superbike and so on. Um, the hardest thing I think is to be able to be competitive. And when you look at what PJ had to deal with this year, that team's not even in the paddock going forward. They were in the paddock for 1 year, essentially. I know where they were prior, but a lot of the blame within the team was put on PJ not training hard enough, which couldn't be any more false.
Oh yeah.
I went and watched. I'll tell you how bad it was for me. I went and watched that bike. I when I went to Portimao this year, I couldn't even bring myself to go talk to PJ because I didn't know where to start. I watched on the edges of the racetrack, going out there and doing a doing a bit of spotting and things. I couldn't even get myself to go say hi to the kid because I couldn't imagine how depressing it was for him. And then when I went to France, I got to hang out with him quite a bit the next round, and I watched the bike there as well. And it's a struggle. And then a young guy that many people probably heard of, but Florian Marino, who's a great kid, just super great guy. I met him through Alex Lowe's, and he took over the spot for PJ at the final round and ended up hurting himself. And I don't know all the things that went around his injury, but I know he broke tib fib pretty bad. And great guy, hard charging rider. He probably got on that bike and was going to go out and try to prove something and this and that. And I think PJ found out really early on that the bike just wasn't up to the standard, and the team really wasn't doing much to help him. So, you know, I think when you say didn't meet your expectations, I definitely see where you're coming from in that. But I think you outlined all the reasons possibly why, and I agree with you. The guy that didn't meet my expectations is probably going to surprise you a little bit. But is Tom Sykes. You've got a teammate that's won 4 world championships in a row on the very bike that you're sitting on. I would think that at worst, Tom Sykes would have been at least top 3 in the championship this year. He's moved over for BMW, and I think it's a tremendous move for him. Maybe it'll revitalize some things. I think that when Tom Sykes was at Cowie and winning world championship for them, and you remember that the year after he won his, he got second in the championship, very close. That was the year that Gintelli won. And if you remember the big bust up between Baz and Sykes, and Baz thought that Sykes shouldn't have beat him at Sepang, and that I think that there's a mental side of racing that can be very difficult when you're on top, and then all of a sudden you get kind of pushed back. Well, when Johnny Ray came in, he beat Sykes on his motorcycle, literally his motorcycle, the bike that they develop a bike around Sykes. Johnny comes in, beats him. They develop a bike around Johnny Ray after that. And really you could really argue the last 2 or 3 years, if you look at his win percentage from what it was before Ray got there to what it was after, obviously it's gone down quite a bit. And that could play on the psyche of a rider. So when I look at expectations, I at least thought that Sykes would be top 3, Greg. Where did he end up? Fourth?
Fourth with one win. One win to his teammates, 17.
And if you also remember, Tom Sykes was the king of Superpole. He literally was the king of Superpole. Even those stats dropped off quite a bit. So I would say for me, Tom Sykes was the guy that didn't meet my expectations. And I know he's been out testing the BMW. I've heard great things about the guy as an individual. So
I like him.
I'm pulling for him so hard. I would love to see him do great things on the BMW and just bring another marquee manufacturer into the fight, because that's what World Superbike needs.
And we've seen it in other sports where, coaches or players go to different teams after being around something for so long, get revitalized, and then, start winning. Any big surprises in terms of riders for you or anything for 2018?
This was the very difficult one for me, because looking at some things, there was some surprises. There was some surprising rides. I thought Forres did pretty well. I thought Forres did well enough to not lose his ride. He's lost his ride to Michael Ruben Rinaldi. I think the big surprise for me, and I think that's another one that you and I might agree on, but Michael van der Mark going into Donington Park and winning both races was something that I didn't expect. I still feel that the Yamaha right now is, I don't know how good the BMW is right now, but I feel like the Yamaha is behind, probably the 3rd best bike on the grid. It would have been interesting to see how to really had a full-blown factory team. I think that would be another bike that would be at least on the same level or maybe even above the Yamaha. I mean, Eugene did good things with it, but when van der Mark won both races at Donington Park, kind of a track that is known to be a special kind of place. Sykes won. How many races did he win in a row there, Greg? Like 8 or 9 World Superbike races in a row.
Yep.
Van der Mark did it coming from the back in the second race as well, and he beat Johnny Ray heads up. in England. So I think Michael Vandermark was, he finished third in the championship this year, won the Suzuka 8 Hour again.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree with you
Amazing.
more. And I think that double win was a tremendous surprise. The amount of podiums that he was able to chalk up was a big surprise, and the fact that he beat, Sykes and Melandri in the championship, I think was a pleasant surprise. And so, I mean, obviously, Vandermark's been a very talented he's motorcycle racer for a long time, but I think that was probably I'm right with you. A really big surprise for the season, a very pleasant surprise to see, kind of his potential being uncorked and we're getting that team, to the next level. And I hope that the success that Vandermark was able to bring to that Crescent team, the Patty Yamaha World Superbike team, also helps out in the off season. And Yamaha's got what, 4 factory bikes now.
Yep.
So it's going to be
Yep.
interesting to see how they spread their resources around and what type of changes they make, because as we know, it seems like it's a little behind, and it doesn't seem like there's a laundry list of parts to test or big
Of
changes.
new things to try. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Where you have, in essence, a new, Kawasaki. It's an Evolution motorcycle, but it is a new Kawasaki, and you have a brand new Ducati, and you have a brand new BMW, and you have a brand new Aprilia if someone chooses to race it. Is anyone racing the Aprilia this year? I don't think so.
That's the question. Aprilia's got a brand new bike and nobody on it. But going back to your point, Greg, don't you think that the World Superbike team, some of the, when we talk about them not really having anything specifically really new, I know they had a new swing arm and they tried that, but really electronic wise and some other things wise, there's not really a lot for them to test. But I think that could be a product of the fact that their MotoGP team struggled as hard as it did throughout the course of the year. Some of the resources I feel get pulled away
Mm,
and get maybe a
hmm
little bit bigger emphasis put on them in the Yamaha being who they are. They've got bikes in both categories in MotoGP and World Superbike, but man, they struggled so hard in MotoGP. I feel like some of the resources get pulled away from their World Superbike effort, but
it
Yamaha
has
really
to.
needs a surge right now, don't
Yeah,
they? They really need a
they
surge.
do.
So
They do. And you're right.
yeah,
It has to, Jay, right? Because Kawasaki doesn't have any bikes in GP. All their resources go to World Superbike, and it shows, you know?
yeah, I agree. Biggest surprise in 2018, I think, when you start looking at who was our biggest surprise for, for in and for World Superbike. For me personally, looking at things, I thought Melandri did a pretty good job this year. I could see why they did the signing of Bautista. Melandri won a couple of races this year. I remember how bad the motorcycle looked underneath him at the beginning of the year. I
Except
was
Phillip
making
Island.
jokes.
Yeah, Phillip Island
It,
obviously was good.
it was good, but the thing is wobbling down a straightaway like a
Oh, yeah,
1970s
true.
Superbike. It was. It just was. It looked horrible to me. The poor guy. I watched him in Thailand. And I'm
You mean one of
thinking,
the ones that you raced when you're in your mid 30s when they were new?
thank you.
Get it?
Yeah,
Like
thank you.
that's
Thanks
an
for
old
that.
guy
Really,
joke.
that's
Yeah,
really cute. Yeah,
thank you. It was
appreciate
a
that.
long
No,
stretch. It was kind of a bad one, but I'll work on it.
it, yeah, but he lost the seat. I think Batista coming in. I don't know if I have a big surprise. That I don't know if there's anything that really
Like not a season
surprised
surprise
me.
for me.
Yeah.
Definitely not. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
I think, that's looking at it, I would say that Alex Lowe's, I think his win was definitely,
Yep.
something to look at. I thought that was great because if you go back to Alex Lowe's win, which was Brno race number 2, the thing
Mm-hmm.
that impressed me the most about Alex's win was that it was, it was one of those times when that reverse grid paid off, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what Ray crashed out. He got in that incident with Sykes. Then Sykes crashed out later. Melandri took the lead off of Lowe's and then ran wide in turn 3 or something, I think midway through the race.
Yep.
And, it was just kind of one of those things, but it wasn't one of those races where you say, well, Johnny Ray was up front when he crashed. He wasn't. Sykes was up front when he crashed. He wasn't. You
Yep.
know, you know what I'm saying? Like the only real
Alex just
challenge,
plodded along, didn't he? He plodded
he
along,
he,
and
he
he got
just
pushed. He got pushed very hard mid race by his teammate, and
he
just
did.
kind of
Yeah.
withstood that, and and did what he needed to do, and kept plotting along and winning that race, which was great for him.
Yeah. No, I
That said, I know Alex well enough to where he wants to go do it with everybody still finishing the race, and I think that when you get a guy like him or it's kind of funny that you and I would look at like somebody like Laverty, say he's underrated, or look at Alex Lowe's and say that we're surprised that they win. These guys are that good that they're
Yeah.
all capable. They all
Yeah.
put in the effort.
Well, that's the difference in this question, right, Jay? The difference is
yeah,
what was the biggest surprise of 18 versus who was the biggest surprise. The who is the Michael
correct.
Vandermark. I think the what is the Alex Lowe's win, not because Alex won the race, because he's fast. And and I think, Vandermark had just kind of like had just won those 2 races before. So all of a sudden it was like this Yamaha wave. I just think the what is a surprise if you look at the overall picture of it, meaning, the way the race ended up unfolding and, the Johnny Ray going down and all that kind of stuff. If you focused on Alex Lowe's in that race alone, other than Marco Melandri really giving him a challenge, and Alex pushed Marco into that mistake that ran him off
Correct.
the track, and I just think that race was a really pleasant surprise for me. And the fact that he got his first World Superbike win, and after we've had him on as a guest here on the podcast, how many different motorcycles, different places he's raced, and you think, okay, great. Alex has now solidified his place in World Superbike. He's got a race win. I thought he might, start to do more of that towards the end of the season, but I just think, tire situation, big tire, does Yamaha last on the end, blah, 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 the whole situation with Yamaha. There's a lot of things, but yeah, I think for me, the what was the biggest surprise of 2018. That's why I'm going with Alex Lowe's in that particular situation, because there were some things. I mean, you could have even said Melandri doing the double right out of the box at Phillip Island, but that really didn't surprise me that much. But or you could say Johnny Ray winning 17 races. That's a pretty.
Oh my gosh,
that's pretty what of a big surprise.
I don't think I would have. I think I would have taken the I would have taken the under on that.
You're taking the under on that one?
Yeah.
Moto America is next on our hit list, Jason, as we review the Superbike part of the season. This obviously is something we live on the daily during the race season. Great championship in Superbike. The points don't reflect it. Tony Elias had 10 wins on the season. Cam Beaubier's 9. So those two were the class of the field. You had Josh Herrin. The beginning of the season for Josh Herrin was spectacular. Bike didn't show up. The TAC transporter broke down, whatever, caught fire, whatever it was, the beginning of the season. He gets on a track day bike, is able to score 16 total points, and then come back and win a race or two, 2 races during the season on all the podiums. I thought all those things were great. Very interesting season, I thought, in Moto America and the Superbike side of things. Even the demise of Roger Hayden, was a bit of a surprise. So, I thought the tire situation kind of defining the season. If you remember, Jay, we started off and Tony, it was like win-win. What was it? Like 4th place.
Just killing it.
Win. And we were like, uh-oh.
Yep.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
Number 1 plate's getting away with it. But in the end, I thought we had a very decent championship. I thought the racing was good. We had a lot to talk about in that championship. My perspective. What about you?
No, the racing at the front, Greg, was tremendous. I think all year long, even the last, like literally the last 3 years of Moto America, there's not really too many races that we can look at and go, well, that was just a blowout. Like these guys, it's been really close. The racing that we've seen has been really, really close. So, but after the first 3 or 4 rounds this year, I'm like, well, it's going to be pretty much a snoozer. Tony's got this thing sort of wrapped up and handled. Mm-hmm. And it was far from that. And, when we start looking at moving forward into next year, I think that it sits really well as far as there could be 3 or 4 guys legitimately pounding on each other every weekend for the Superbike Championship in 19. So
I'm going to say 4. I'm going to say 4 to 5.
I agree with you. I mean,
right? Because I'm only going to add. Yep. I just think the top 4 on the factory bikes are all capable of doing the same pace, and I think that if with the aggressive testing schedule that Westby Racing has for the electronics, and if Scholz can make just a tiny adjustment in his riding, you know what I mean? I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know if it's just a little bit because he's so amazing. He's so talented. But if maybe it's the electronics that help him out. But I just think that if Scholz finds the right combination of whatever the tweak he needs to make to be consistent at the next level and those electronics, that he could be a top 5 guy that we could see there every single weekend.
For me, Matthew has to, like, just looking at it again, there's no question the guy could win. He has one, so there's no question in that. I felt like he just once he got kind of a bite of the cherry, he started overriding the equipment a little bit instead of
Mm-hmm.
just. He always looked so settled to me, and then it seemed like the harder he tried, the worse the results got. And when you're riding at the level that he's capable of, you're already a tremendous rider, and when you start to go over that edge or push over that, that's when things start to get a little bit sloppy. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if Matthew goes back and he looks at some of the things that he did this year when he went through a little bit of a bad run, and I think that a lot of that was just because there were some times when I would watch him ride and he wasn't as fluid as he was at the beginning. I think if he could find some of that form again and they can make the bike better as well, I think with a combination of those two things, he'll be fighting at the front
I agree.
for sure. When that
And
that's
by
that's
the
my
way,
feel on it.
I'm making the assumption because Garrett Gerloff is a tremendously talented rider. I'm making the assumption
Mm-hmm.
that something is going to click with Gerloff, and he's going to be able to get right up in the mix with Bobier and with Tony and with Josh Herrin. You know what I mean? Like,
No, when we
because I
yeah.
think Garrett's talented. I mean, I'm convinced he's talented enough. I just think there's just a little something like Matthew, but Matthew's is different. Matthew can show the pace, I think, in the dry, and Garrett has like when he goes to a track that was like more of a 600 type track, Pittsburgh, for instance, you were like, oh, here we go, Gerloff's finally made it. But I think that
Yep.
there's just one little thing. If he figures it out in testing in January, then he's just going to be part of our everyday conversation.
Well, when you and I looked at our questions and we did the most underrated rider 2018,
Mm-hmm.
like right off the bat, it's a
Mm-hmm.
guy that nobody ever talks about. That's Jake Lewis. I think Jake Lewis is a tremendous rider. He's a good kid. He's a good talent. Incredibly fast. I think that M4 team gets that bike a little bit better. And we heard Chris last week on our podcast talking about the new electronics. Maybe that's going to help somebody like Jake. I think Jake's as good as any of these guys. I really do believe that too. That's not even something I'm just saying. When we pose these questions to each other, I really felt like Jake could be a guy that could be a front runner. I mean, he's done well, but if you look at his season, it was like a kind of a weird season. He only finished 1 point out of fifth, I believe, Greg, to Garrett Gerloff. So when we look at somebody like him, for me, I think Jake could be another one of those guys that could be that sixth guy that you kind of would throw in that mix.
I initially I said, well, because we're so close to it, I don't think any rider's really underrated. But now that you bring up Jake Lewis, I agree with you. And I think that there
Yeah.
were some things holding that M4 X-Star Suzuki back. It's definitely not at the level of the factory Yosh bikes. I mean, those are bikes, those are Japanese motorcycles that they go to Japan, they build them, and they bring them back. The bike that and they start off as street bikes, but they're full blown factory bikes versus what M4 X-Star had to work with. Plus, they had a deal with Yosh to develop their kit electronics, and
Mm-hmm.
you throw that development in during the course of the season that not a lot of testing in. I agree with you. I mean, I look back at the results for Jake Lewis and I see the amount of fifth place finishes that he had.
Oh my gosh,
Knocking on the
15 of them,
door.
right? Is that
Yeah,
is
so
that is that 11? Wait, what's no 11
11
points
points
is
is 11 points is fifth place. So
yeah. Is that right? I thought it was maybe sixth, but I could be wrong on that. But I know you can look. This what is it?
10 point or
25, 20, 17, and then it goes 15, and I believe from there. So, anyways, he
well, you
had
go
15.
16 down. I think you go 16 down to 13 down to 11, and then after that you go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
right, there's nothing in the middle. That you go from 16 to 13. So I think there was 9, something like that. 9 fifth place
that's
finishes.
crazy.
He had a
Yeah, I had him
podium.
as 15. I looking at it, but yeah, he had a podium, a couple DNFs there.
Yeah. And he had a
But
podium at Utah too. So yeah, no, I agree with you on this one. I think that Jake Lewis definitely is our most underrated rider in Moto America Superbike class.
yeah,
For 2018. And you know what, Jason? Yosh probably thought the same thing. I mean, he was hired as a Yosh rider, and then he got hurt in the offseason, and then the Tony Elias thing happened, and Suzuki kept him
yeah,
around. So obviously, Don Sakakura and that Yosh team saw something in Jake Lewis that they liked a lot. And
yeah, for
he
sure.
hasn't diminished skill wise as a rider at all. So, who was the rider that you thought didn't meet your expectations for 2018 in Moto America Superbike?
Well, you brought him up already, and I'm expecting a lot better things, bigger things. Always in a good mood, it seems. And when I do my interviews, for the telecast each week, I would get somebody that I would get a chance to go and actually sit down and talk with. I enjoyed my talk with Garrett Gerloff almost more than any of them because I got to get to know who he was and what kind of makes him tick a little bit. I think if you go and you talk to Garrett, he would tell you that his expectations were probably a little bit higher for 2018. And I feel that if the truth is real about his accident at VIR, and I called it a little bit on the telecast, that his crash did not look normal to me. It didn't look like he had done anything wrong. The bike was almost upright. I think that shook him a little bit. Not didn't shake his nerves, but when you get pitched off the high side of a super bike, it definitely, gaining your trust and getting comfortable again can definitely be something that can take some time. Garrett Gerloff showed to me this year that he's got pace. He's got pace at certain places. I thought he did well. I think that he's got to figure out race strategies a little bit more over long distance on a big bike compared to the 600. We remember how blazingly fast he was. But I really expected Garrett to. I knew he was going to get podiums, but I kind of expected him to run up front a little bit more than he did.
Right.
There was a lot of races where he was quite a ways back. And I think that Garrett's going to go into 2019 hungrier, stronger, going to have a little bit more of an idea what to expect. And I think we're going to see a different Garrett going forward. He's too good to finish as far back as he did in some of those races, and I think that he'll shine through a little bit more this year.
I see where you're coming from. For me, it's not my like the rider who didn't meet my expectation the most, because for me, I was kind of giving Garrett a year of a
Yep.
year to grow. I thought that he would grow throughout the year, and it ended up being up and down. So I totally get it. For me, it's Roger Hayden, obviously. I mean, you look back
Yep.
at the year he had, but it's such a complicated thing with Roger. The death of his brother and the emotion behind that, and then we don't know when he made the decision to retire, Jason. And the thing is that we know from being in this sport a long time that once that thought creeps in your head, you just slow down. I mean, I've never met anyone who goes, I'm retiring this year, and then they have the best year they've ever had on a motorcycle. Maybe it's happened,
Yeah.
but so
Hey,
yeah,
Danny Pedrosa. I mean, Danny Pedrosa this year was shocking, and I love Danny Pedrosa. I
yeah,
really
me
do.
too.
But don't you got to think too that everybody was rooting for Raj and Danny Pedrosa this year. Everybody was. They wanted him to have that kind of spot where they were. And Raj had some. The funny thing about Raj this year was the start of his season was so rough. I mean, we're not used to that. Raj is the guy that literally finishes races, is consistent. And this year, at the beginning of the year, whether he got taken out a couple times this year, and he crashed on his own accord a couple times. So I think that the year started kind of weird for Raj. Motivation was there at the beginning, but then kind of eliminated from the championship. Then kind of felt like he was not going to continue on with the career after this. So I could definitely see your point. Biggest surprise, Greg, going into 2018. I think when we look at who was the biggest surprise,
Yeah,
I think we both agree on this one. For
yeah.
me, and I can't say that it's because of talent. I can't say
No,
the talent we know is there,
no,
1,000%.
because I know who you're going to
That's never
say.
the
I
doubt.
know who you're going to say. You know what I mean? So I agree
The
with you on that
guy,
one.
yeah, Josh Herrin to me this year put himself back on the map a little bit.
Not a little bit,
But
a lot of it.
he didn't just do it through. Yeah, but he didn't. I think Josh is a funny guy for a number of reasons, but I think that his riding this year, gone are the days where we speak of Josh Herrin needing a toe to go fast,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. I think that um, when he shows up in Atlanta this year and truck doesn't show up, and he just jumps on his stock bike and goes out and at least gets some points and damn near put it on the podium in the second race, had his clutch not
That's
gone.
right. Yeah.
I should have taken it to his local Yamaha dealer and got that clutch sorted before the start of that race.
Free
Yeah, but he's
Yamaha
done a
dealer
good job,
plug.
and he's proof that that you still can earn a factory seat by riding your heart out. Josh is not a guy. He's been around forever now. I mean, he's been around for a long time. He's a veteran, really, of the series when you think about it, as young as he is. And he had one little brief stint in Moto 2. And I think that
A AMA Superbike Championship, right? So
AMA Superbike Championship, yep.
yep.
But I think that even that, when you look at that championship, our point system was different, and there was some things clouding it a little
Yeah,
bit.
true.
Josh Herrin right now is a legitimate week out race winner, 1,000%. Like there's not a time going into 2019 where I can say that Josh Herrin's not going to be at the front of every one of these races, especially with the team and the crew that he's got around him. So to say he was my surprise for a couple of reasons. It was my surprise because I knew he was coming in with attack. One of the, like, we've already praised Richard Stamboli and what he's capable of. But Josh, I think, developed more as a rider and proved that I love the way he starts races. I love his intensity. I love the way he goes after it. I don't think there's another rider on the grid that does that. So he's exciting to watch. I think moving forward into 19, I'd like to see him healthy because he was talking about his weekend when he talked about pulling a back muscle or whatever it was
Laguna.
at Laguna.
Yeah.
The thing I hated more than anything at Barber was seeing him just go backwards the last 5 laps of both races. So maybe fitness. I'd love to see him increase his fitness. I think if Herrin increases his fitness even more so than he is, he's got the mindset to win, and I think he'll be right up there at the front in 19. He was my surprise at 18 though.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think the other thing to really add, because there's not much to add to what you just said, is that his impact on the series and the fact that he wants to win as bad as he does is absolutely spectacular. Yep. And I think that I was so glad to see him stay in the series, whether he was going to be with Attack or Yosh and not go somewhere else or not get bounced on a 600. I think Herrin's exactly where he needs this series to be, I guess, is kind of the best way that I could put it. All right. What was the biggest surprise of 2018 for you, Jason, in Moto America Superbike class?
You're going to laugh at this one because it's a bit of a sellout, but
what else?
The championship itself. The championship itself.
Are you serious?
I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you why.
You need to, because I'm getting ready to tee you up. Go ahead.
Don't tee me up, G-Dub. You don't want to do that because I'll destroy you. Okay.
All right. Here we go.
Tony Elias went out and won the first 5 of 6 races. My own mind, I'm thought, even though I know things can happen and people can get injured and stuff, I'm like, barring an injury, this championship is done. When you get a guy, Tony Elias, Superbike champion, who goes out and wins 5 of the first 6, and nobody else is really close. I believe I think he almost had almost a 2 full race lead after round 3. It was so big and so this and that. And then we get to Road America, and with the introduction of the tire and Cameron Beaubier's refusal to lose that race, especially the second one, the tides of the championship changed there. And I think it made our championship so much more interesting that between that tire change, Greg, and I think that has something to do with your biggest surprise at 18, but the championship itself and how it started to formulate mid-season when you and I would sit in the booth after the races and talk about, well, what are we going to talk about? The championship's looks like it's out of reach already almost,
Yeah.
And Cameron Beaubier fought back like the champ he is, raised his level. Yamaha got a bike that made him even more comfortable on that tire. I think the comeback of that and Tony's decline with the tire was pretty interesting to watch.
Well, I guess in a way you and I agree, because my biggest, what of 2018 on the surprise side is going to be the Dunlop tire. And if you're not familiar with Moto America and you're listening to this podcast, in essence, what Dunlop did was they introduced a new larger size rear tire, and is about 11 millimeters difference in height on that tire. And the reason they did that was because riders were asking for more edge grip. And so they came out with this larger tire, and it really, it did 2 things. It took Tony off of his pedestal, off of that 5 race wins in 6 tries. and got Cameron Beaubier on the right track. But the thing we didn't talk about a lot was, and we focused on the rear tire quite a bit, was there was a new front tire introduced, new compound front tire. And it was one that Cameron Beaubier had tested in the offseason and really, really liked. And having been to Buffalo, Jason, and seeing how tires are made, I was up there, I think a little bit past midway through the racing season, and how long it actually takes to make these tires. They have to plan ahead. So they get the tire, and then it was, Road America before that tire actually got introduced. So for me, the team that made the quickest adjustment, to the front and to the rear tire.
Yeah.
But in essence, we're both saying the same thing. I'm just saying the cause of the championship. So, yeah, now that you've explained it further,
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, we're kind of on that same page. So,
yeah, I think my explanation was way better than yours. Let's just say that up front. But yes, I agree with you, Greg.
Can we move on, please?
We can. Let's do that. Let's look at Super Sport. Going into the year again, I expected, I'm not going to throw you in that bus, but I thought JD Beach would run away with the championship. Nobody would be close. Well, again, I was wrong. Hayden Gillum stepped up. I never thought Hayden Gillum was underrated. I felt like he wasn't rated. Like people wouldn't rate Hayden Gillum, and I knew how good he was. So the fact that I didn't consider him to be able to go up against JD Beach and beat him was only because I didn't realize how good the Ridiculous Racing team was going to get going into 2018. Their commitment to go out and hire some amazing people, build that team, make it a bigger presence in our Moto America paddock, and they got the right rider. Hayden Gillum is a kid that he's a bigger guy to ride a 600. I thought that would weigh against him, and he comes right out and wins the second race, the first round, second race at Road Atlanta. And I think you and I both kind of sat back and went, wow. And then he went to Virginia and did it again. He won the first race there. And he went through his struggles this year where I think that he was trying, he's trying to win all the races, of course. But Hayden Gillum this year was a standout for me. I thought he did tremendous. And when you look, Greg, going into 2019, this is something I'm going to bring into you right now. He had 118 points on DeBees, who ended up third in the championship. Yeah, he finished 88 behind JD, and that was because of a couple little DNFs in the middle of the season. But who's going to step up and get after Hayden Gillum going into 19, I think might be a bigger question than when we look at standouts of 18 or what was really shocking for us in 18.
I know the answer to that question. Are you kidding me? There's a little New York native named PJ Jacobsen.
Oh,
so, yeah. Right? I mean, I agree with you, though, because... And Hayden, looking ahead, Hayden is going to be faced with the same problem that he had with JD Beach, which is the weight difference and the size difference. And there's, Hayden is fit. I mean, he trains, he's fit. He drove the Hayes' bus all year, but he had a bike on, whatever. It's not that. He's just a big guy. He's like 6 feet tall and has broad shoulders. And if you see him punch a hole in the air compared to what JD Beach was doing or what PJ will look like, it's totally different. So some of those long tracks we go to are really going to be a struggle for him. With that said, I can remember watching Aaron Yates, who was also a big boy, win 600 races at Road America. So, I don't know. I mean,
I think I need to rephrase what I said a little bit different. Like, who's going to step up? I know PJ is going to be there, but again, it goes back to how much testing he gets, how good the bike is.
I mean, because there can be a learning curve
around him.
No, you're right.
Yep.
Yeah,
these guys, Hayden's coming in. He already knows what he has. He already knows the team. He already knows the bike. PJ is not going to take any time to acclimate himself. But what I was getting at are, who are the guys that were racing this season in our championship?
Oh, yeah.
That are going to be able to. Yeah. We don't know who's taken DeBees' spot yet,
right,
on that M4 team. There's a couple riders that are still out there. We don't know who that is. We understand that Sean Kelly just signed, and I don't know Sean at all, but he just signed with the M4 team.
And he's 16. You got to give him a year. You're right.
16 years old.
You got to give him a year.
Red Bull rookies
right.
kid. Yep.
I mean, Bryce Prince. Prince knocking on the door. I don't know what Bryce is doing. Nick McFadden.
What about McFadden on their?
Yep. He's going to be his teammate on Ridiculous. So, can Nick step up? I don't know what Escalante is going to do. You're right, Jay. Hopefully we're going to see one or two riders emerge beyond PJ Jacobsen, and we're going to see super sport racing that we've seen in years past. And it's not going to be Hayden and PJ just walking away with this. Nick's going to be able to step up. Whoever that the Ulriches are going to be able to pluck out on that M4 and try to fill that
They always find
beast.
somebody good, and that's
Always,
great. But
yeah.
Escalante, I mean, when I look at the rundown, you got Nick McFadden 5th, Escalante 6th. We don't know what Mazziato's doing. Corey West, I don't know what Corey's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Braden Ort's another young talent. I think will be even better this year, riding for Tuned Racing if he does end up back there. And Jason Aguilar, 10th overall in the championship last year. He's probably a little pissed off. Probably has a chip on his shoulder. I think that Jason's another kid that can definitely run up front, but we just got to see who's going to bring it to that next level. So
here's the thing:
Super Sport will be interesting going into 19.
Hayden's not going to make the mistakes that he made, I don't think, this year in terms of the couple DNFs he had. And my concern with PJ is, and he is unbelievably talented, but you can test until your face is blue. You're not going to know how well the Dunlop front tire after being all those years on, Pirelli tires. If your brain goes to automatic in these early races and you're trying to race Hayden Gillum hard, PJ, not by PJ's fault, but there's a possibility a mistake would be made. I've seen too many times Pirelli riders get on Dunlops and early on in the race season, their first season, lose the front, and it's just because it's so much different. Yeah, it's just a lot different. Okay, so that's Super Sport. And recapping the Liqui Junior Cup season for those of you that had gotten to watch the first year of multi-bike competition, because we went from the KTMs riding it. We had Alex Dumas, the young Canadian, win that championship by 74 points over Corey Ventura, Jay Newton, Ashton Yates winning races, Sean Umbarski, who didn't really meet my expectations as much as I thought he was going to. Jackson Blackman, Gavin Anthony in the mix. What do you think about Junior Cup as we looked at that, Jason? It was kind of a question mark at the beginning of the year because it was now adding multiple bikes and the rules needed to be changed during the season. I thought Moto America did a good job in getting those bikes competitive by the end of the season. What did you think?
Couldn't agree with you more. I think that KTM and Kawi had such a huge advantage at the beginning of the year that they definitely needed to create some fairness in the category. I really enjoy the racing. It was the first year you and I actually got to commentate on it. Looking at when you look at the top three, Dumas, Ventura, and Jay Newton. The only other guy that you can really throw in there that was there each weekend was Ashton, and he just made too many mistakes. Ashton just tipped over a bit too much. The beginning of the year was hard for Ashton to get off the line.
That's right.
But
yeah.
he was, if you remember, and then they kind of got some of that sorted. He had a couple DNFs. I think Virginia had a DNF because of the clutch. But he had a couple of I think he got disqualified. I can't remember which one he got disqualified at, Greg, but there was just some things there that took Ashton kind of out of the points, even though he was fast. But Alex,
it was race number 9, by the way. Second race of Utah, he got disqualified. Yeah.
And I can't remember what it was. Was it a jump star? I can't remember, but he didn't pull in.
He didn't pull in. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
But little things like that, hurt his points tally. But he was always up front. Won probably 4. I don't know, more than I do, Greg, but probably 3-4 races this year.
Yeah.
But I think that when you look at it, Yamaha finished second and third in the championship with Ventura and Newton, and the Yamaha was at such a huge disadvantage at the beginning of the year that they gave up quite a bit of points. The thing that comes to the forefront for me, with Alex Dumas winning the championship, was once they started to try to get the rules changed, add some weight, decrease RPMs, do some of those things, Alex was still able to try it. He's still winning races, and Laguna Seca to me comes to mind more than any of them, where he was 5th or 6th in the first practice, and things were a little bit gloom and doom over there, and they had to really figure out how to make the motorcycle better because some of the advantages that he had were taken away, and he ended up winning that weekend. And I think that really boosted his confidence going forward. It really showed him that if he can learn to work within a team structure, where on the other hand, Sean really struggled. Umbarski struggled a lot. But that's also Sean's inexperience. Sean doesn't have the same racing pedigree, let's just say, as Alex does. Alex has been doing the KTM Cup before that for 3 years. So, I think if Sean goes into next season, it could definitely be better for him. But Moto America did a great job. of trying to even out the playing field. I think Corey Ventura and Jay Newton were a couple of definite. Corey doesn't surprise me. I've always rated him very high. Jay Newton did a tremendous job this year. I think it was Utah, the first race at Utah or the second race at Utah, Greg, where I made the comment that it was like that was the race of the year for me as far as the kids go, because he just rode as hard as he could.
Yeah, second race at Utah. Jay, the one that Jay, yeah, and then he had back-to-back seconds after. You know what I mean? That Utah, and then we went to the 10th race of the season, which was the first race of Sonoma, and he finished second there too.
Yep.
So,
and then he won a race as well. So when you look at Jay's season, he was definitely a kid coming on and getting stronger as the year goes, and I think it leads itself well going forward for next year.
I love what Jamie Osadio was able to do. I was really sad that she got knocked back in the results. I can't remember what race that was, but
Utah. It was Utah when she made a couple she kind of swerved a little bit coming out of the last corner, and you're allowed to make one move, and she kind of made 2 or 3, but I'm so glad you brought her up. I mean, it's so good to see her on the podium and doing as well as she is. She'll be strong next year. She's going to be tough. And after what Anna Carrasco did in World Super Sport 300, winning that championship, don't be surprised to see her, up there next year, winning the championship or being right there in the mix.
Well, Jay, that kind of wraps up kind of the stuff we were going to talk about. But before we wrap this entire, podcast up, you have a very broad, kind of a world view of racing in general. I was just curious, is there anyone that you can think of that maybe people don't know a lot about that does excellent things on the racetrack that, because there's so many other series out there. There's BSB, there's the road races like Isle of Man. I mean, World Endurance, we don't get to see very often. There's so much road racing out there. Is there any one person in particular that stands out in your mind that you think's an absolute stud, on the racetrack?
Well, for me, Greg, like you say, I love to watch everything racing. This guy that I'm going to talk to you about real quick actually raced today and won today, believe it or not. True journeyman of racing. But if you don't get a chance to watch him ride, you should at least look him up. But Peter Hickman is a friend of mine, races in the BSB Championship, finished 5th this year in that, made the showdown over there the last 2 years. Only guy in a BMW that did that this year. But on top of that, he won the Macau Grand Prix again. He became the fastest guy around the Isle of Man and averaged 135 mile an hour around the Isle of Man this year, winning the senior TT, which, is insane. The Ulster Grand Prix, he won both. He's a big guy, Greg, is Peter, too. And he won the Ulster Grand Prix in the Superbike category, and he won Super Sport on a Triumph, believe it or not. So he rides a BMW mostly, but he rides a Triumph. And then today, he won the Robert Holden Memorial Race in New Zealand on a track which is eerily named the Cemetery Circuit in New Zealand. It's a street course that is actually part of their national series. But when I look back, I sit there and I thought at the end of the year, who would I talk about that nobody knows that much about? And I've raced World Endurance against Peter. He's only 31 years old. But what he does on a motorcycle and as much time as he spends on a motorcycle in a year, I wanted to just give him a shout out because I really, really rate Peter. I actually didn't even have this in my notes, but I actually raced with him last year at the Phillip Island Classic. So he goes over and does that as well. And you won't meet a nicer guy. He's just such a good dude. So if you get a chance, have a look at some of the things he's done. I know some of our listeners they stream the BSB Championship as well, so they know who he is. But I wanted to just throw a word out about Peter Hickman and just say, hats off to him on a tremendous 2018, and I hope that everything goes well for him going forward into 2019.
That's awesome. And how far out are we from the Phillip Island Classic for you? When are you leaving?
Oh, I leave on the 20th of January. So yeah, we leave on the 20th and go on over. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know you and I'll there'll probably be a couple more things to talk about over the next 3 weeks before I leave. So I'm excited about it, and going into 19, I want to thank you for all your hard work that you do. We get a lot of comments about things that you and I do in the booth, and you bust your ass and tee me up in all the right ways because of the research you do. And I'm excited about this podcast that we're doing. And yeah, I hope you have a great new year. And when we move forward, I think that there's a lot of things that you and I are going to get a chance to talk about in 2019, and seeing where all our championships go.
Sure, man. And thank you. I mean, you were the initial push to get this thing done, and here we are. We're 9 into it as we start 2019. So I appreciate all the stuff you're doing, and of course, all the insight too, dude. I mean, it's the greatest thing
Yep.
about working with you is I have no fear. If I throw you any question, you know the answer to it, and it's not every broadcaster I've worked with that can do that. So it's a lot of fun,
I
and we got a
appreciate it.
passion for it. You know what I mean? So, look, this was a real long podcast, and we hope that this holiday season that we were able to kill some time for you, whether you're on a drive or
Yep.
you're at home trying out some new device, and the family's getting on your nerves or something, and we were able to help out a little bit. So,
I can see a couple guys out there saying at their in-laws' houses saying, "Hey, I got an important business call for the next hour and
seriously,
40 minutes." So yeah, I could see that.
yeah, but listening to our voices for like an hour and 40 minutes, I mean, please don't harm yourselves. That's all we're asking. Don't harm yourselves.
Break it all up.
Yeah. But listen,
Thanks to all our
it's been
listeners
really
and all our
fun.
people. Yep.
Jason, it's been really fun these first 9, and I'm looking forward to a whole season. And listen, we're trying to do these every single week, but we don't know. Jason goes off to the Phillip Island Classic. We may have something, going on that's short, or may have to skip a week, but we'll definitely keep you posted as to what's going on in the world of motorcycle racing. We have Supercross coming up here real soon, Jason. I think that you and I are talking about like a fantasy Supercross maybe, and we'll start talking about that. And
Yep.
we got flat track
Yep.
to talk about, and there's so much great stuff coming up for 2019.
Gonna be great, man. Happy New Year.
Happy
Greg.
New Year,
Thanks for
Jason.
everything.
Happy New Year, everyone out there in listening land. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time right here on the Greg's Garage Pod with co-host Jason Pridmore.